Hello there. Gotta keep it down. Everyone's asleep, so sorry I'm talking super low. This lesson here, you see the title, Identifying Key Features of a Graph. This is the directions, so when we answer these things, we can refer back to this to help us answer. Our functions are just linear or exponential. Points of interest, we definitely can identify the x and y intercepts. Probably will leave this one blank. This one's a little tricky, but basically what we're answering what happens to the y values as x gets, so here it says very large, but basically as x approaches infinity or gets very large, what happens to y, and then same thing as x approaches negative infinity, what happens to y. Domain and range kind of similar, but you can see the question here, what are all the possible values for x is your domain, what are all the possible values for y is the range, and then over here on the right side, we've done this before, but we can definitely look at increasing and decreasing again. Slope or rate of change, and then write the equation. We can do that. So we'll use these blank sheets. As you see, this is all blank, and we'll start answering for these graphs. So I'm just going to quickly talk about it. Let's see here. We have, obviously this is linear. Points of interest would be like the x-intercept is at 2, the y-intercept is at -4. We can't really see the negatives, but these are the negative below 0, right? So x-intercept, y-intercept. This graph, as you can see, is traveling up, so it's increasing the whole time. In order for us to write the equation, we probably should get a couple points like 0, -4, 1, -2, and 2, 0. And if we take those points, we could see that this graph is, or we could even just count the rise and the run too. We could see that the rate of change though is every time it goes up 2, that's, look, rise 2, it's run 1. So rise over run is 2 over 1. And so if your rate of change is 2 over 1, that's your slope. 2 over 1 equals 2. So 2 is your slope. Your y-intercept is -4, so we would write down the equation is y equals 2x minus 4. As far as domain and range, remember, you just trace along the graph and you see how far will x go all the way to infinity. How far will x go this way? All the way to negative infinity. And then for y, same thing. It's going to keep going up all the way to infinity and down all the way to infinity. And then, so we talked about domain before and range, but you can kind of think similarly for the end behavior idea. End behavior is basically saying as x approaches infinity, so as the graph moves right, what's y doing? Well, guess what? It's going up, so y is also approaching infinity, and we'll see how to write that down. And then as x approaches negative infinity, so as the graph moves right, what is y doing? Y is going down. So as x approaches negative infinity, y also approaches negative infinity for this graph. And then you can kind of, let's scroll down here and see what we find. Oh yes, the answers. So we just looked at graph A, and you can kind of see all the answers here. This is how we're going to end up writing end behavior as x approaches infinity, y approaches infinity. Depending on what it's doing, this is the format. As x approaches negative infinity, y also approaches negative infinity. That's not always exactly how it is. As you can see, some of these answers, these are the answers, by the way, for the different graphs, the 6 different ones. You can see the equation down here. And anyhow, just do your best to kind of follow along and see if you can make sense out of it. And so, let's see here. We just looked at graph A. I would leave you be on that. Graph C. Graph C starts to be exponential, and we can look at things like points of interest. X-intercept is at 1. 0 or 1 0, sorry, 0 1. Y-intercept, or gosh, let me fix that. Y-intercept is at 0 1, and X-intercept actually is NA, not available, because remember, it's never really going to touch X. Remember that the graph will approach this line but never actually touch it, so no X-intercept. The graph is traveling upward. That would make it increasing. Domain and range, remember domain, you're seeing how far to the right it goes. It is going to keep going to the right as it goes up. So it is approaching all the way to positive infinity. And as it moves this way, it will keep moving to the right. So X will approach negative infinity. Then we have the Y values. This is going to keep going up, up, up forever. Y is approaching infinity. But it doesn't go all the way to negative infinity. Y is never going to reach 0. So we could say the Y values are always greater than 0. If you just say that the range goes from 0 up to infinity, that would be acceptable, but technically it doesn't ever hit 0, so it's more accurate to say the range is Y is greater than 0. The domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity. And then end behavior, like I said earlier, similar idea. As the graph approaches, as X approaches infinity, guess what? Y also approaches infinity, meaning as it goes to the right forever, it's also going up forever. And, oops, sorry. And then down here, as X approaches negative infinity, Y is actually just approaching 0. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up there and just show you some answers here. Oh, wait, before I do that, let's go back to that one. The equation on this one also, I think I would want to write down some points, you guys. So I'd want to write down 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, 9. I'd want to write down these points so that I can see exactly what's happening. But even just from me telling you, I can see it is multiplying by 3 and the initial value is 1. So this is actually the graph of Y equals 1 times 3 to the X power. So if we scroll down here, we can see that the answers for C, which we just looked at, are everything I just told you. End behavior, right? As X approaches infinity, Y approaches infinity. As X approaches negative infinity, Y is approaching 0, as we talked about. Your domain and range here, as we talked about, very similar. We didn't talk about this, or actually we did. This graph was increasing, which I don't know that we have to write all this. It's always increasing. And we did also point out the equation Y equals 3 to the X power. So hopefully this helps. I'm not going to go through and explain every single one. The answers are here. Try to get through all 6. That way you get some good practice. Thanks for having a look.